The American dream is a rags to riches story, where anyone who seeks a good life can achieve even the highest reaches of their aspirations, regardless of where they began, which can mean that the American nightmare is that even if you've reached the highest echelon of society, there's nothing stopping you from losing it all. And it was this exact sequence of events that befell the Vanderbilt family, the richest family in the United States, squandering every bit of their fortune just half a century removed from when it was first made, despite all the warnings from the man who made it all happen, with their only mark on the world being the stories of their excessive opulence in the largest home in America to this day. This is the story of the epic rise and inevitable fall of the Vanderbilt family, and this is Learn Something New. A descendant of Dutch settlers who came to America in the mid-1600s, Cornelius Vanderbilt was born into humble circumstances on May 27, 1794, on Staten Island in New York. His parents were farmers, and his father also made money by ferrying produce and merchandise between Staten Island and Manhattan in his ship. As a boy, the young Vanderbilt worked with his father on the water, attending school only briefly. When he was a teen, he was transporting cargo around the New York harbor in his own boat, and eventually, thanks to a $100 loan from his mother, he was able to acquire a fleet of small boats and learned about ship design. In 1813, Vanderbilt married his cousin, Sophia Johnson, and the couple eventually had 13 children, before, strangely enough, he married a different cousin 40 years younger than himself after his wife died in 1868. Outside of his personal life, Cornelius Vanderbilt initially made his money in the steamship business. In 1817, Vanderbilt went to work as a ferry captain for a wealthy businessman named Thomas Gibbons, who owned a commercial steamboat service that operated between New Jersey and New York. The job provided Vanderbilt with the opportunity to learn about the burgeoning steamship industry. In the late 1820s, he went into business on his own, building steamships and operating ferry lines around the New York region. Shrewd and aggressive, he became a dominant force in the industry by engaging in fierce fare wars with his rivals. In some cases, his competitors paid him hefty sums not to compete with him, though this was only the start of his ruthless approach to business, earning himself many enemies throughout his life. After amassing some wealth, Vanderbilt decided to build a large home for his family in Manhattan's present-day Greenwich Village neighborhood at 10 Washington Place. Though, despite his ever-expanding wealth, the city's elite residents were slow to accept him, considering him rough and uncultured. But what they didn't realize was that Vanderbilt was just getting started. In the early 1850s, during the California Gold Rush, a time before transcontinental railroads, Vanderbilt launched a steamship service that transported prospectors from New York to San Francisco via a route around Nicaragua. His route was faster than an established route across Panama and much speedier than other alternatives, like going around Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America, which could take months. Vanderbilt's new line was an instant success, earning more than $1 million, which translates to about $26 million in today's money every single year. And it was shortly after this time that he was infamously involved in the Erie Railroad War of 1868, when he battled the Wall Street traders Jim Fisk and Jay Gould, who I discussed at length in my video about the duo crashing the gold market. The two men sought financial control of the Erie Railroad, but the Erie was controlled by Daniel Drew, who conspired with Vanderbilt to buy up the majority of the shares in the railroad. In response, Gould and Fisk issued additional watered-down shares, which Vanderbilt continued to buy. The Erie Railroad War came to a bizarre close when Gould and Fisk gained ultimate control of the railroad, pushing Drew to retire while paying back Vanderbilt for his watered-down stocks. Undeterred by this, Vanderbilt went on to other endeavors, and was the driving force behind the construction of Manhattan's Grand Central Depot, which opened in 1871. The station eventually was torn down and replaced by present-day Grand Central Terminal, which opened in 1913. But unlike the magnates that followed him, such as steel business giant Andrew Carnegie and Standard Oil founder John D. Rockefeller, Vanderbilt didn't buy many grand homes or give away much of his wealth to charitable causes. In fact, the only substantial philanthropic donation he ever made was in 1873 toward the end of his life, when he gave $1 million to build and endow Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. In truth, he wanted to keep as much of his wealth as possible in his family, but he would never realize just how monumentally foolish this decision would be, as it would lead to the entirety of his amassed fortune to vanish a mere half-century later. When he died in 1877, his fortune totaled approximately approximately $100 million, more than was held in the US Treasury at the time. He allegedly said to his son before he passed that any fool can make a fortune, it takes a man of brains to hold on to it. Believing that keeping the majority of the fortune in one place was the best way to make sure it wasn't squandered, he gave the entirety of his wealth to his son William Henry Vanderbilt. Billy, as he was called, did everything he could to continue building what his father started, doubling the family fortune to over $200 million within his lifetime. But he failed to uphold his promise to Cornelius, which was to leave the bulk of the family's money to a single descendant. Instead, upon his passing in 1885, he left the family's stake in the company to both his sons, Cornelius Vanderbilt II and William Kissam Vanderbilt. The division of the Vanderbilt fortune in the third generation coincided with a decline in the family interest in New York Central, and a gradual increase in their spending, though Cornelius Vanderbilt II would manage the railroads until his death in 1899. His brother, William Kissam Vanderbilt, took over, but retired soon after to concentrate on his yachts and thoroughbred horses, while their brother George Vanderbilt had decided to spend wildly on a 146,000-acre purchase that he would turn into Biltmore Estate, eating a large chunk into his side of the family fortune. Biltmore Estate contained the Biltmore Mansion, the United States' largest home to this day, even surpassing the White House by a factor of 3, at 175,000 square feet or 4 acres within its walls, along with 250 rooms with 65 fireplaces. It's a remarkable work of extravagance while also being an extraordinarily wasteful money dump, with everything costing the family over $1 billion in today's money, also tying them to extremely high upkeep cost with every passing year. And this was far from the only property they held, having 10 mansions in Manhattan alone, each one being taken on to fuel their ego and to show off their fortune. They were also far more philanthropic than those who came prior, giving consistently to many different causes. But as the generations spanned further, their fortune dwindled, forcing them to begin selling off portions of their accumulated possessions, shrinking Biltmore Estate's 146,000 acres to just 8,000. Within 50 years of Cornelius's death, the family had little left to show for his work. Journalist Anderson Cooper, a 6th-generation Vanderbilt, claimed that his mother made it clear to him growing up that there would be no trust fund waiting. All of their homes in New York City were torn down by 1947, and Biltmore Estate remains open to the public to this day as a museum in Asheville, North Carolina. It was seemingly inevitable that the fortune once built by Cornelius would eventually be spread into nothingness, though nobody could have predicted it happening as quickly as it had. When those who have excessive wealth are not the same people as those who worked to build it, it ceases to hold any meaning. As William Kissam Vanderbilt was quoted as saying, "Inherited wealth is a real handicap to happiness. It has left me with nothing to hope for, with nothing definite to seek or strive for." And while he struggled with this idea, he was also working to ensure that his descendants would never have the chance to. Thank you for watching Learn Something New. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, as it really helps the channel out and you get to see more videos like this one. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.